All right, we're going to get started on animal and plant reproduction. We'll start with the notes video for the part one. So we'll do male first and then female reproduction. Your note packet is pink. It shows, this is an egg in the background, so you can see the size. This is a microscopic picture. And then the sperm are swimming in and trying to fertilize the egg. So I'm going to use, I printed some white paper. So grab your highlighter, grab your pen, pencil to make comments, notes, annotate. So here we go. Male human reproduction. So the gonads you already have learned for males are the testes. Go ahead, highlight that. So in the testes, there are coiled tubules where sperm is produced. Okay. So this is where we make the gametes, the sex cells. You learned all this vocab in the last few weeks. At puberty, large amounts of testosterone are produced. You did learn the male sex hormone too. Let's underline it again. Okay. Remember, from the pituitary, FSH and LH are the sex hormones that are going to go to the gonads. All right. But then the responding hormone released at the testes is the testosterone. All right, and you have two gonads in case one breaks down. The epididymis stores the sperm. Go ahead, highlight there, storage place for sperm. Okay, this sits on top of the testes. It kind of looks like the coiled up tubule in the testes. Let me see your picture packet, which is pink. Mine just happens to be, it kind of shows. It kind of looks like spaghetti, kind of all coiled up. So we'll label the picture packet in class, but I like to use it when we're going through everything. The scrotum. The scrotum is the skin pouch that houses the testes. So one of the things they ask about on the Regent sometimes is an adaptation. You could bring up this organ you learned about. So the scrotum, the testes sit outside the body because the optimal temperature for sperm production is lower than body temperature. And the scrotum will raise and lower the testes depending on what the outside temperature is. It wants to be optimal. So there's a little muscle there called a cremaster muscle, but you could just talk about an adaptation would be the scrotum to make the perfect temperature to maintain homeostasis so that the sperm are viable. So depending on that, the scrotum can be closer to the body or away from the body. All right. The vas deferens are next. The vas deferens is the tubing. This is the tube. Leads from the testes to the urethra. Okay. Now remember, you learned about the urethra and the excretory system. So urine exits the penis, but don't forget, there's only one opening. We talked about this. So males will ejaculate semen and excrete urine out of the same tube, the urethra. Okay? The sperm travel through this as well. Now, the following three structures add fluid to the sperm in the vas deferens to make semen. So you have the prostate gland first. Let's talk about this. And we're going to watch the video in class. You're going to see, we have footage traveling right through the urethra. So you'll see the prostate gland. This is going to add fluid to help control the pH of the female reproductive tract. So we don't want it to be too acidic. We don't want the sperm to die as soon as they enter. All right. So this is going to try to neutralize the pH. The seminal vesicles are going to nourish the sperm. We want to make sure they have that nourishment. It is a long swim. You're going to see here, we'll use this picture in the picture packet. Sperm are deposited down here, and they have to swim all the way through the vagina, through the cervix, through the uterus, and then almost all the way up here, okay, into the oviducts. So it's a long swim. The Cowper's gland is next, also called the bulbourethral gland. This releases the fluid prior to ejaculation to control the pH of the male urethra. Okay, so think about this. There's a little bit of fluid that comes out first prior to semen. And why is this? To coat the urethra. So let's say, what if that's acidic? You don't want to kill the sperm right before it even leaves the male reproductive tract. So that pre-fluid stuff is going to help with the male pH of the urethra. All right, now, some people will say this, so pay attention. This is important. It does contain living sperm. And you may hear people say that fluid that comes out before ejaculation does not have sperm in it. It could. All right, it could. All right, and then you have the penis for the guy, the last part. So this is the organ through which sperm are deposited into the vagina. Now, we talked about the difference between external and internal fertilization, and that was one of the differences. All right, so what is the erection? All right, kids over the years think it's ligament, tendon, bone. It is none of the above, right? It consists, if you've had health class, you've talked about this too. It's 3 layers of spongy tissue. And what happens, it fills with blood. That's what the erection is. It's blood in that spongy tissue. And then in combination with the nervous system, it will tell the body when to release the sperm. Okay, and it deposits the semen. And really, you should get used to saying semen because it's going to have the fluid from the prostate, the seminal vesicles, and the Cowper's gland. All right, and you will practice labeling. You have the side view and the front view, okay, for the male. Okay, then we're going to move on now to the female. I will tell you, the side view is the tricky one for the female. The front view, most people do okay with this. But we'll come back to this picture in a moment. All right, so female reproduction. The female reproductive tract, you have your ovaries, which you guys have learned, right? The female gonads, the ovaries. They release the mature egg. So when a female is born, when she's younger, she has all her eggs for her lifetime. Some students think, oh, once she hits puberty, she gets her first period, she starts maturing the egg. Well, the eggs mature then, but they were immature. They were there, okay? And so they release the mature egg at puberty. Oops, my lights just went out. And again, those pituitary hormones you learned about, FSH and LH, help with this. So one egg is supposed to be released, that's the plan, one egg is released each month from one side. Again, you have 2 gonads, females have 2 ovaries, and you can live on one in case one breaks down. So one egg is released on one side for 1 month and then one the next. And this is called ovulation. That's what ovulation is. Underline it, put a star there. Now, we're going to talk about twins in the notes in the next video, but sometimes, there's all different reasons, your age, stress levels, different things. We release more than one egg, and that's when you have multiple births. They can be from the same side, opposite side, and you're going to have to know about fraternal twins, identical, and we'll chat more about this. All right, so take a look in the picture. This is the ovary, the side view, okay? And then this is the tubing. This side view does throw people. Now, here's the ovaries and the female in the front view, and then these are the tubing, the oviducts. Now, the tubing has 2 names. You can call it fallopian tubes or oviducts. These are the tubes leading from the ovary to the uterus. This is where fertilization occurs. Notice I have asterisks. I have it in uppercase letters. Could you underline it? A common mistake kids will make when you say, where does fertilization occur? The sperm lands in the vagina, right? The semen's here. It's deposited here. They always say uterus. They think because the baby grows there that that's where the sperm meets the egg. That is not true. Fertilization, when the sperm enters the egg and now we have a zygote, the sperm land here, swim through the cervix, through the uterus, half go this way, half go that way. And the ones that aren't fertilized die. So the ones that go that way, and then let's say this is the side she ovulated on, they will just die off. The body absorbs it. The immune system gets everything out. So they would swim all the way up to like right about there. All right. So where does fertilization occur? That'll be on your weekly quiz, and that'll be on your unit test. All right. It occurs in the fallopian tubes or the oviducts, not the uterus. Okay, if an egg gets fertilized, We now call that a zygote. Underline that, highlight that. And it starts to undergo mitosis, which we've been chatting about. This was our last unit. It just starts to do cell division. The beginning stages of development, it starts to do it as soon as it's here. It starts to travel back, and it starts to do mitosis. It goes from 1 cell to 2 to 4 to 8, and we'll talk more about that later in another video. If the egg is unfertilized, so now there were no sperm deposited, no sperm made it all the way up there, the egg just disintegrates, and it actually comes out in the period. And a girl cannot see the egg within the tissue when she's menstruating. But we'll talk about that in this video in just a couple moments here. All right, next. All right, so let me go back to my diagram. So here's another version of it. It's good to be flexible with all these different diagrams. There's the vagina, the cervix, there's the uterus, the oviducts, okay, or fallopian tubes, and there's your ovary. The uterus is a muscular organ. It's very strong. Strong muscular organ. It has very thick walls, and they become enriched with blood vessels. This is part of the menstrual cycle. Why? To support that developing embryo. So it's going to build this up every month. When the embryo implants in the wall, a placenta will develop. So if this is the month that she ends up pregnant, embryo will implant and that placenta develops. Underline this, put a star here. What is the placenta? It's the tissue from the mother to the embryo where nutrients pass. Kids always say, I heard that people eat the placenta. They do. Some cultures, they eat it, they bury it under a tree. Some people put it in their freezer and use it later. All different cultures do different things. All right. You can actually pay at the hospital here to save it. Some people like to use the tissue from it in case the umbilical cord and placenta, maybe there's a medical condition and they want to use some stem cells, which we will chat about in the genetics unit. But stem cells they're not differentiated yet. So some people do pay to have it saved, pay a monthly fee to keep it. And the hospital will prepare it to go to that location. I think they're stored in Albany, actually, currently. The umbilical cord is for transport only. So let's underline umbilical cord, put a star there. This is transport only. So here's the developing embryo and fetus. There's the placenta. And then that's the umbilical cord, what attaches to your belly button. Okay, that's transport only, and this is for the diffusion for materials to pass. Once the embryo is 8 weeks, we now call it a fetus. At birth, there is a hormone called oxytocin that's released that causes the fetus to expel. If the egg is not fertilized, underline this, if the egg is not fertilized, then the uterine lining breaks down and leaves the body. That is called a period or a menstruation. So what occurs is every month when a girl has her period, this uterus wall, it doesn't know if that's the month an embryo is going to implant. It gets super thick and vascular, lots of blood vessels, ready to help that developing embryo. So if there's no sperm was deposited, no zygote came down, developing embryo, this whole inner lining of the uterus rips and tears and sheds. It just passes right down the cervix, out the vagina, and that's what a period is. And the unfertilized egg would be right in it. You wouldn't know the difference. Now, that cervix. Let's talk about the cervix. So we're going to go back to the cervix. It's right here. That's the opening to the vagina. It's this narrow opening between the uterus and the vagina. The muscle stays tight during pregnancy to prevent premature birth. Something forms there called a mucus plug. That always grosses kids out when I say that. But they call it a mucus plug. It's like a little membrane of tissue to keep out pathogens. All right? And then at the end of pregnancy, we're going to talk about this in development. You'll see it in the video. girls will notice they lose their mucus plug, they say. Or the doctors, when they do an exam, will tell you that it's gone because the cervix is starting to dilate. So it's when you hear, oh, she's 2 centimeters dilated or 3, you get to 10 centimeters, so right to here. When the cervix gets that large, then you can start pushing. You see when in the movies, they push when there's a contraction. So they're waiting for the uterus wall to contract and expel the baby, and they kind of push at the same time. But they wait for that to get 10 centimeters. So muscle stays tight during pregnancy to prevent premature birth. The mucus plug forms during pregnancy to keep out the germs, and then the muscle dilates at birth. You can put 10 centimeters there. They're not going to ask that, but on the Regents. All right. Okay, and the last part of the female reproductive tract is the vagina. The sperm is deposited for fertilization in the birth canal. It's also called the birth canal. So vagina, sperm is deposited for fertilization, and then when the baby expels, we call it the birth canal. All right. All right, we're just going to do the menstrual cycle, and then that'll be it. All right, so you have to know the menstrual cycle. What's happening inside this uterus in the female reproductive tract? On average, it occurs about every 28 days. But that's not, it's different for different people. All right, so it depends. It stops twice. It stops during pregnancy and menopause. Underline that. That's often on the Regents. When will the menstrual cycle, the 2 times in a female's life? Well, she's pregnant. There's no point, right? She's already pregnant. That's the whole point, to release an egg. So it's going to stop while she's pregnant. The other time is when she hits menopause, later in life. The body, it's not adapted to be able to go through this when you're older and aging. So we stop ovulating. Okay, which it's all different. Some people are late 40s, some late 50s. It's all different. Okay, there's 4 parts to the menstrual cycle. You need to know these. Number 1, the follicle stage. This is where the ovaries secrete estrogen and the egg is going to mature inside a follicle. This happens up to 14 days. My notes are cut off there. Up to 14 days. All right, grab your picture packet. I'll have you do this at the same time. I like to label this while I do this. Here's an actual calendar. I have a little bracket around this. So write number 1, follicle stage. So up to around, some people ovulate around day 12, day 13, day 14. They have little kits in the store you can buy because your body temperature changes. So you can kind of check it to know when you're ovulating. People that are having a hard time getting pregnant or trying to make sure they know their cycle and when they ovulate. All right, so ovulation. The egg is released around 12 to 16 days from that follicle. The follicles, I like to think of like they're tiny little cups all within the ovary. Let me show you a picture. One of these has. So that's what they look like. They're like little cups holding. See how it says follicle and holding the little eggs or the ovum. Remember, egg can be called ovum. Now, they're immature when she hits puberty and middle school. Most girls tend to get their period in middle school, some in 5th grade, some 9th, but it's an average. 1 follicle will mature 1 egg per menstrual cycle. Okay, so now the egg releases. So now you have the corpus luteum stage. This is when the follicle becomes a mass. That little cup turns into a mass called the corpus luteum. And now it starts to secrete that second hormone you learned about in the endocrine system girls release, progesterone. So I want to underline estrogen is up here, progesterone is down here. This is going to help get the lining of the uterus super thick and vascular, full of arterioles, venules, like we talked about, the capillaries. It's going to get it very thick and increase those blood vessels. That'll be like the end of the cycle, the last 2 weeks. So go to your calendar and your picture packet, yours is pink, write number 2, ovulation, so somewhere around here. And then I put like a little bracket for number 3. The last 2 weeks are the corpus luteum. And the very last thing, if there was no egg, or if there was no sperm deposited, then you have a period, a menstruation, also called menses. If the egg hasn't been fertilized, then the uterine lining breaks down and passes out of the vagina. Okay, 4 days average. Please highlight this whole thing. At the end, FSH is high, estrogen is low, and then it starts all over again. So in your notes, if you look at the next page, I put a picture there. Oh, here it is underneath. There it is. They like to show the menstrual cycle in these calendars or graphs, okay? And they use like the dates of a month, like a calendar at the bottom. Sometimes when kids first look at these, they're like, whoa, we have like 4 million things going on. They do. But you can figure it out. Let's look at it and break it down. So here it's labeled days of the menstrual cycle. So 0 to 28, you know that's the average. This is showing follicular development, the follicles. So this is that little cup inside. Where's that picture? Oh, which, by the way, write menstruation if you didn't. And they give you little tidbits of what's happening. So inside that little cup, inside that little follicle, that's what they're trying to show. That it starts to swell up. It's developing the egg's release, which is ovulation. And then this is that corpus luteum that turns into that mass and releases progesterone. So here's your abbreviated hormones, which you learned are from the pituitary, right? And then these are the 2, estrogen and progesterone, from within the female reproductive tract. So see how the estrogen is going up, then it goes down. Progesterone is going to be high at the end once that corpus luteum is made. Now, you do not have to have these memorized. They will give it to you in the graph or chart on the regions, and they have you pull data from it. So it says pituitary and ovarian hormone levels. So pituitary, the trick I taught you was abbreviation. The ovary releases estrogen and progesterone. This says the endometrial cycle. This is like a picture of like the level of the vascularization. So here's when the period is shedding. The inner lining of the uterus is shedding, and the period, the tissue expels. It's leaving. And see how it's building up again? And then it's nice and thick. Okay? Then she'll have her period again if no sperm are deposited. So hopefully you can... when you look at this now, you have a better understanding. They refer to the beginning as a follicular phase and the end, the last 2 weeks, the luteal phase. Now, here's the same thing. Okay, they broke it up and used different lines, but see the dates? Ovulation at the bottom around 14 days. There's the uterine lining again, building up, and then this is like a period. Or menses, same thing, the shedding. The estrogen and progesterone, they put the pituitary hormones separate, FSH and LH. You can see they peak at ovulation. Oh, they actually show the body temperature in this one going up. You can see that. And then this is a picture of the follicle. Okay, and then that turns into that corpus luteum and then shrivels up and it's done. All right, that's it for the part 1 video.